This is Troy King with Imagine Out Loud with the third episode of God's Bar and the Problem Patron. Turning to the king, she suddenly remarked, "Sorry I didn't fully greet you earlier, your majesty. I'm Lillian Golden Peak and this is Jackson Willow." Jackson seemed to stand up at the mention of his name. Sir Locke, puzzled, responds, "No need for any ceremony. The entrance may be in my kingdom, but this city is somewhere else, isn't it? I doubt my reign extends here, so what about this Jackson? Does he speak?" "Get to know him and you'll understand him just fine." Sir Locke was even more confused. "Who said I was the king to Mr. Jones?" "Well, Mr. Jones knows everything about his guests, and Jackson here probably already knew. He sees things in his dreams." Suddenly, some doors creaked open and in popped an unimposing figure with black and red hair. A girl barely the height of the tables walked in and screamed, "Hurry up, Mr. Jones!" In a surprisingly adult voice. Through the door, a laugh rang out. "Elsa, you're in your 60s and still can't wait for me to catch up?" Sherlock's eyes bulged at the girl. 60s? She was barely that to him. Slender frame, bright orange eyes, short and short-tempered with a childish demeanor. Surely he was joking. Elsa shouted, "Don't make me float you here." "Just try it." A skeleton arm suddenly gripped the door and wrapped in flames, orange and flickering, with a face that appeared three-quarters of it still skeleton. One burning bright eye was still flesh and part of his jaw and his mouth. His left side down to his stomach also showed bone and burning. Sherlock couldn't speak, just looked at the man, if he could be called that, up and down as he came. He wasn't too tall, maybe 6 foot if not shorter. The king had him in size, but he was wearing a half-burned leather suit, black on one side and white and gold on the other, split down the middle, in colors, that is. His hips sported two weapons unfamiliar to the king. He could see the holster ends, but that was the rest. Well, that was covered inside the suit jacket. Mr. Jones, already at the table, reaches out his human hand on his right side to shake the king. "I figured you might be more comfortable with this one." With a half smirk, Mr. Jones and Sherlock reached out to shake his hand. "So where are your men? We have enough food and drink for all travelers." "Waiting outside. I wanted to go unnoticed. I see now that it wasn't possible. So what is this place, and if I may be so bold, what are you?" "Well, this is my city, my small world, to be a bit more precise, and I am its master, but in truth, I'm just your average barkeep." Sherlock grinned. "Barkeep? You have your own plane of existence. Some might even call that divine." "Unlike the gods, I take care of my people, more than just sending down a hero whenever I feel like it." "Sherlock, you speak as if you know their temperament and will. We mustn't claim to understand the divine." Trying to cover himself for any gods that were listening. "Relax, they can't hear us here. I've met the gods of your world, and they're just like toddlers to me. This bar here has a door to every world and every universe." Sir Locke seemed confused. "Then how old might you be, Mr. Jones?" "I stopped counting after I started drinking. Do you want to send a letter to your kingdom, if you'll be staying 2 weeks?" I muttered that to myself. It's odd to hear it said back. "If possible, just tell my wife of the time I'll be home, and the priest something no one would know, just to give him a good scare." Sir, I only know about my guests. That is still Arya's world. I wouldn't impose on the youngling's jurisdiction." "But not to disappoint. Worry not." He dropped a little bit of fire in an envelope. It didn't burn and then sealed it. This should spook the priest. He laughed and the king smiled. "Good, he never stops talking. Hero this and hero that, demons, blah, 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 blah." To be fair, his life is probably pretty boring. He needs to add excitement somehow. Mr. Jones suddenly brandished a bottle. "As do we all. Go get your men." The group spent the rest of the day drinking and suddenly burst into songs so incoherent even Jackson, still sleeping, could have probably done better. Sir Locke, totally wasted at this point, stopped singing and asked Mr. Jones, "Does he ever, wake up? I'm sure it's been 8 hours at least. He looks great. Why the beauty rest?" Rests his hands but misses his chin and strikes the table, suddenly laughs. Jackson has never woken up. He was born sleeping and he just kind of is. Sir Locke stumbled and waddled over to Jackson, putting his hand over his shoulder. "You're all right." Sir Jackson, suddenly shocked, Or Sir Locke, suddenly shocked, could understand him. What do you mean my breath stinks? Breeze on his hand. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry, Jackson. Sir Locke began to stumble and Mr. Jones got up. Boys, I think it's time for the inn. Mr. Jones picked him up by his shoulder and the king shocked it didn't burn at all. The skeleton arm was warm and comforting. Sir Locke, I think it's time to show you the Fairfield Inn. The view is great. Suddenly, the pair were walking along with the king's men past the doors, and they creaked open to a wondrous sky filled with beautiful neon colors and greetings. It glowed brightly, and fields of neon fruit and grain seemed to shine back at the sky in a mixed light color palette. And this sight was broken up by the massive towering structures seeming all windows and binding steel shine dully back. It seemed to glow. They spotted the landscapes for miles, buildings that seemed to touch the sky far beyond what the king had ever seen. It seemed one was just between every field of animals. And just seemed to pop in and out of chickens and cattle, but also dogs and cats that seemed to be on fire. It was a whole different universe. Then beyond the buildings lie houses surrounded by fields, dome-shaped buildings for the local Majaran and Patoris that didn't like city life. Suddenly the sounds of vehicles seemed to ring out, totally foreign to the king. He saw a hovercraft and seated them all similar to a bus. It was so gentle that the ground seemed to have a small breeze as it flew to the Fairfield Inn.